Thank you. I'm Nick Gazer. I'm the director of the Soil Health Partnership, and I guess what I'll be talking a little bit about here today is just what we're going through, not just the Soil Health Partnership, but in collaboration with many others in the space to help further update the measurements for soil health testing, talk a little bit about calibration tactics that we're using, how do we calibrate these tests, and then how do we interpret the results that we get from the field as we're going through it. So part of this is kind of theoretical. At the end, I do have some results from the Soil Health Partnership sites in Illinois. We have 18 sites throughout the state, so I do have some summary numbers up here. But it's very early on in the program. We're only 2 years into it, and we recognize that we need several years of data before we can really calibrate any models for soil health. But this is just kind of the thought process we're walking through, and others in the space as well, so to hopefully create better tools that everybody can use. So really it's starting, what are we asking for? What do we really want to get out of a soil health assessment? And so when I look at this is just how I wrap my mind around what I'm trying to get out of the soil health assessments that we're using for the Soil Health Partnership. We want to create better tools. So this farm planning on the bottom left-hand corner, we know over the winter months we put together the best plans we can for that upcoming growing season. So if we have better tools during that farm planning sessions, that off-site, off-winter, or off-season management time, we have better tools then, we can put together better plans for split applications of nutrients. We can have better plans for planting prescription, herbicide control, or weed control, insect control, pathogen control. Trying to put all these pieces together, that's what I look at when I'm thinking about off-site or off-season farm planning. And then, as we all know, Mother Nature throws curveballs, machinery breaks, we have labor issues, things like that come up throughout the year. And so we move into this in-season management. That's where the adaptive part of it really comes in. So we make many decisions throughout the year to change our plans, adapt to what Mother Nature throws at us, so that we can hopefully protect the yield and optimize every single acre that we have out there. And so what we're looking at, okay, what components of that can we inject soil health decisions into throughout the year? And this is off season, this is in season as well. Where does soil health touch our management? How does it touch our weed control? How does it touch our insect control? How does it touch our nutrient management planning? What's it mean for pathogens? If we have an additional cover crop species out there that might be an alternate host, what does that mean? So we're really trying to look at the whole system together, and then really tie it to, in the lower right-hand corner, the three big things. So what does it mean for your yield? We don't want to lose yield. We're never going to recommend any practices that lose yield. We know we lose customers if we do that. And as a farmer, you're not going to use practices that consistently year over year are losing yield. You know you're not going to go for that. And as a function of that, you don't want to lose economics. I mean, profit margins are really tight right now. We don't want to recommend services that are going to lose their customers money. As farmers, we don't want to have people come in and recommend services that are going to lose us money. So we're trying to figure out, what does this mean if we are injecting cover crops, in a new management practice into an existing cropping system? What does that mean for short-term economic variability? Years 1, 2, 3, what are the expectations there? What are the expectations over the longer term? 3 to 5 years, 5 to 7 years, something like that. And then really the long term, what does that mean for your farming career or your agronomic service career? What does that mean over that long term? So it's looking at these different time frames and trying to create the data collection system so we can address questions at each one of those phases. So with this program, I'll be speaking specifically a little bit to the Soil Health Partnership testing program and what we're trying to get out of it. But it's mostly working with farmers who are in transition. Farmers who are very new to conservation practices, whether it's adopting cover crops, maybe they've only tried them 1 to 3 years, no-till, maybe they're brand new to no-till. Nutrient management, maybe there are lots of opportunities to improve nutrient management. Most farmers I know and I work with have nutrient management plans, but on every operation we know there are opportunities for improved efficiency. So when I think about this cycle, we have many moving pieces in that cycle every year, but when it comes to soil health, I'm sorry, that's a little bit faint. When it comes to soil health testing, we know that we have some options available. We have the Cornell Soil Health Assessment. We have the Haney test. Missouri's lab just started up some soil health testing. So we have these different services, And what we're trying to get to is a better understanding of how these relate to our individual soils in that spot you're at within that given field. Really on that subfield basis, work on that same precision level that you're already working with your customers or the farmer you're already working with in terms of variable rate applications, yield monitoring data. We want to get down to that fine-tuned level. So with that, we could start with existing measurements. So throughout this talk, a little bit later on, I'll present some data from the Cornell Soil Health Assessment. And I'm just starting there merely because it's been published upon, the individual methods in the assessment have been published upon, so I feel that's a good starting point. We have more of a historic publication record to fall back upon. But if new measurements are coming on, how do we validate those? How do we calibrate those and ensure that they're consistent field to field within each different cropping systems? How do we get to that point? Versus old measurements, are those old measurements the calibration tools? We've heard some already this morning about nutrient management and recalibrating different nutrient management strategies, different fertilizer products, the new biological products coming onto the market. How do we know that they're working? And then how do we update our measurements to assure that they're working? So that's part of the process. The calibration and validation, I kind of break it down into three main steps. The first component is just planning and experimental setup. So as a new technology, a new assessment comes out, you go back to what's been done before. So you look at, say, as a scientist, you look to peer-reviewed journals. What's been published in the scientific community as a starting point. It's a good basis to understand where we want to go from there. So in that, we can look at previous trials that have been done, look at previous trials, what were the yield responses, what was the variability, what was the soil variability, all these different components. We can look at those, and based on that variability, we can start to understand how many sites we might need to calibrate a new test. And then with that, we can start to think about, okay, well, how much fundraising do I need to work through to make sure I have the funds to go do this, or how many other people do I need to work with in the space to make sure we have enough sites to really get enough data to calibrate the test. So that's kind of that planning phase. Then we can move into the data collection phase, and I'll spend a little bit more time on this. What do we need to collect and when? So as we're thinking, again, throughout the entire agronomic calendar, when do we collect the data? What do we need to collect to make sure we have all the data we need to further calibrate these new assessments? And I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then that last piece, data analysis interpretation, data is only as good as how well we analyze it, and making sure we have the most up-to-date statistical procedures, the right people in place to really work through that data in as many ways possible so that we know that the recommendations and interpretations coming out are statistically calibrated, statistically valid, that we can really rely on those as we're going out to make recommendations. So those are the kind of the phases. And then the last one up there, it says education and standardization. This is where we actually take it out to the field, work to come up with better recommendations, standard recommendations. As we're talking about soil health, we've heard a lot about the variability in messaging, soil health products. So how can we work together to better understand what's real, what's not real, and then as we're talking about it, what we can do to help inform other farmers, other retailers on what's real, what's not real, and where we need to go. So the calibration and validation questions, again, I'm sorry it's a little bit faint, hopefully you can all see it, and I'll read through it as well. But what are we going to calibrate against? As we have a new soil health assessment or individual metrics within that soil health assessment, so we look at Cornell, and again I'll pull that up. If we're looking at aggregate stability, what do we want to calibrate that against? What's the most important question to ask? Is it yield? Is it calibrating everything against yield? Historically, we've done a lot of that. We've done yield calibration. That's a good place to start. But right now, with economics being as tight as they are, do we go further? Do we go further than yield and jump right through yield towards economics? Do we calibrate to economic functionality or return on investment on a subfield basis? Maybe that's a question we need to invest more and more in. Or what are the environmental factors? Heard about some water quality issues already this morning. We hear more and more about air quality as well, carbon sequestration, all these different things. Do we want to calibrate against environmental factors? So that one's maybe a little bit further out, and maybe these are all questions that we can ask and work through in different priorities. But it's good to kind of think about what do we want to calibrate against? What's the most important question to ask? what's the farmer getting at, what is, as you as a retailer, what are you trying to get at as well. So it will greatly influence what you're going out to collect and what you're going out to really measure in the field. So I like to start there. And then as we're thinking about these three, economics, environment, the yields, how do they interact? Do they all interact and work the same way? If you have a high yield response, is that also a very positive environmental response? Do we have a very positive economic response? Or the inverse, do you have a high yield response, low environmental response? How do they work? And we know they're probably not going to work the same way in every different soil type with every different cropping system. So how do you tailor that to a specific location? So it's these interactions. What's the variability, and again, what are the trade-offs? If we're going for yield, again, what are the economic costs? If you're only going for yield, how does that law of diminishing returns? Is that next bushel worth it to invest in that field? If not, what does that variability look like? So these are, again, just setting up some questions to be thinking about as we're calibrating the soil health assessment. And again, not just the soil health partnership. There are many people trying to do this together, but these are some of the questions we're thinking about and trying to move everybody ahead. Jumping to the data collection, this is very centric to the soil health partnership, but some of the components in here are similar with other initiatives going on out there. But the data we're collecting, again, we're starting in the preseason, working directly, enrolling farmers in the program to set up replicated randomized strip trials. And these are strip trials that are working on farm scale level, probably very similar to nutrient management trials or yield trials, hybrid trials that many of you have engaged in the past. We're trying to take that structure and replicate use that structure to go further. So we have just 2 treatments replicated 4 times. And then in the preseason, it's a little bit light again, but collecting a lot of soils data. So we're interested in calibrating soil health assessments or different components of those soil health assessments. So we're trying to collect a lot of yield data to understand which components are the most responsive and the ones that we want to calibrate against. And then again, how they vary. So we collect routine analyses. We're collecting the Cornell Soil Health Assessment and the Haney test on every site. The routine analysis is done every year, and the soil health assessments are done in year 1, 3, and 5, and hopefully beyond that as well. We've extended the program to go a little bit further, and it's just trying to figure out what time frame do some of these different soil features vary in. Nutrient responses, we might see those in the first couple of years, so a physical structure might change, or the aggregate stability, the water holding capacity might take 5-7 years to see some changes. So it's making sure you collect measurements on the same time frame in which you want to see the response, or you might see an expected response. And then coming back within the growing season, trying to track the changes to that growing crop throughout the year. Again, we don't want to lose yield, we want to manage the components of yield throughout the year. So if we have a new cover crop out there and we're testing the soil, how does that influence early season vigor? How does that influence our weed counts? Do we have more weed pressure, less weed pressure? Does it influence their economics? That's going to factor in, or yield story, that's going to factor in. All those different components, we want to make sure that we're capturing that data, or those data throughout the year. So we really know what's going on with that crop as it's growing. This could be looking at soil samples throughout the year. This could be looking at plant tissue sampling, looking at aerial imagery as well to get a good assessment of how that crop is doing, using all the tools that we have currently available within that testing field. Then at the end of the year, using georeference yield data, again, so we can work at the same precision level that our farmers and advisors are already at. We don't want to look at a full field basis. We wouldn't do that. As a farmer and retailer, you wouldn't recommend to work at that level. There are many reasons why we've gone to precision data. So within this program and many of the other initiatives trying to calibrate yield or soil health tests, we're working at that same level. Because that precision, it gives us a lot of power to understand that yield variability and how to really come up with that best assessment. And the last piece, the economics. The economics, you can take several different forms. You can look at just management practices, collect all the management practices for that field, and then assign book values to it. And that removes some of the marketing values or marketing efficiency of an operation, the size of an operation. If you're looking at just soil changes economic changes associated with management and soils, then you probably want to remove some of that marketing efficiency or size variability in the different operations and just look at the management practices themselves. So this kind of pulls a cycle together, and there are many more measurements we could look at, but this is just a baseline to start to calibrate some of these tests. So the question is, how many locations, what's the variability, what are all the different factors that might affect the soil test? These are very similar. You've probably worked through many of these, but if we're looking at a specific soil type, what are the different soil formation factors that really influence how that soil is formed, what the texture is, many different components of that soil, is it poorly drained, not poorly drained, and then what does the climate look like? Do you have heavy rainfall? Do you have lots of weather variability? Do you have sandy soils coupled with low rainfall? What is your expectation for that soil? And I'm looking through the cropping system and cropping rotation as we're starting to calibrate these assessments. What are the other soil factors, the type, the structure, what's your organic matter percentage look like, what does your drainage look like, all those components. Those really will have a large factor or influence on your yield response, your economic response, the environmental response, as they all tie together as well. The rotation, that fertilizer history, it's probably no surprise that many of these factors are up here, but it's just understanding what factors may drive the different soil changes and how responsive those soil changes might be over time, especially as we go to interpret the results and try to make recommendations after that. Maybe we can come back to this at the end, because we'll probably have some time in thinking about just how do we come together and standardize the interpretation, standardize recommendations for the soil sampling. But that educational piece is incredibly important. As we collect the data, we want to figure out how to communicate about the data in a consistent way. So that as we go make recommendations to other advisors, other farmers, that we're very consistent in that, and we don't want to provide misinformation and wrong information. So it's collaboration and partnerships. Through events just like this, where we're educating ourselves on what's going on, this is a very consistent way, whether it's working out with ag media, whether it's conferences. It can take many different forms, just making sure we're talking, we're very consistent in what the results mean, and how to move forward. And as a function of that, as we gather more data, we'll update our understanding of what soil samples we should be taking and how to take those soil samples. I know talking with Dan and Jim as part of the Soil Health Partnership, there are a lot of questions in how we take our soil samples, and that's not just specific to us, that's across the board with soil health assessments.
And like many things, you get one answer and it creates 3 more questions.
That's exactly it, yeah. So when do you take the soil health assessment? Or are there different soil metrics within that assessment that maybe we should be taking at different times? How does it affect soil biology? How does it affect soil physical structure? And those components, what does that timing look like throughout the year? Or does it not even matter? Does it matter whether or not we take the soil samples in the spring, in the fall, mid-season? Dan's classic answer, it depends. And largely that's probably going to be true, but to a certain degree. But we can look through and work through each individual one to understand what that variability looks like.
I mean, just one example I can throw out.
Sure.
That you pointed out, they went to the soil penetrometer. That's a good test, but the field needs to be at field capacity. It needs to be moist. And I talked to Dr. Van Ness. I said, we can't always have it at that moisture level when we're sampling. Well, you need to. I go, it doesn't work out.
We're not allowed here. We're out in the field. It's trying to make sure that we have consistent recommendations for the sampling even before we go any further. And so in the data collection process, it's trying to collect those samples at different points in time so we can understand what that variability looks like and what we might expect for different regions. Even looking across Illinois, the many sites we have in Illinois that we're testing, that's a lot of variability. I mean, even within any county in Illinois, we're going to need a lot of variability. So how do you capture that? How do you work with that variability to make the best recommendation you can? It starts with the data collection. The more sites, the better. That's usually where it starts, and try to move from there. And I'm sorry, I didn't mention on the lower right hand corner, those are sites that we have right now.
Do you use the same lab?
So yeah, that's a great point. I mean, all the different sources of error in the samples, that sampling bias. How are we collecting our samples? Are we consistent in the grid or the zones that we're sampling across? The depth of the samples. Is it the 0 to 6 inch core? Is it a 24 inch core? Is it a 4 foot core? What's the diameter of that core? How is that sample processed after we take that sample? Is it sent out immediately, overnight shipping right to the lab? Is it sitting in a cooler for 3 days before we get to the post office to ship it out? Is it not sitting in a cooler? Is it going to the same lab? Is it going to, are the samples going to several different labs that we're going to try to calibrate against? All those factors are very important. That really those will influence the recommendation, or those recommendations coming out. We're going to try to address a lot of that. Bring forth the best recommendations we can for sampling consistency. We have a science advisory committee that's come together to make recommendations on our sampling protocols that we need to use. A lot of discussion has gone into the development of those protocols. We've landed on really two main factors. One is consistency. Whatever you choose, do it consistently year over year if you want to interpret those results and see changes. No matter what your protocol is, just make sure you're looking similar time of year. And then along with that, a lot of the recommendations were for the spring so that we could adaptively manage after that point, see what the levels are of nutrients, of soil biology, of the physical structure, and then make our management recommendations past that.
But it raises questions, even like our protocol says before corn planting. Well, this year, got out there in March and sampled. Versus, well, let's see, no, it's too wet in April for us, but in May. And it's still both before planting, but how much difference
is it before fertilization? Is it after fertilization? Before tillage? After tillage? There are a lot of questions out there on how to do this stuff and do it consistently. And there's a lot of depends in part of it, but we can be somewhat systematic as well. I mean, we can create the best case scenario that we want to create and make those recommendations. It's not a perfect world. There's a lot of gray area and a lot of this. So we're going to try to do the best we can, but also in developing those soil sampling recommendations, is trying to sample at different points. What does it mean before? Take samples before fertilization, take samples after fertilization, before tillage, after tillage, all those components.
If it's wet, if it's dry.
All of that. And you can keep adding these factors in, and your data pool gets bigger and bigger, and cost goes up and up. So you have to have that balance between how many samples can you take versus how many factors you really think, based on previous studies, are going to influence the numbers coming out. And then along with it, so we set up soil sample recommendations. What are we going to use those soil sample recommendations for? What are we going to use the soil health assessments for? Are we going to change major components of our recommendations to our farmers for different parts of the cropping system? And if so, how does on-farm trialing work into that? Should the soil health assessments be a standard protocol when we're doing nutrient management sampling or nutrient management trialing on our farms? Maybe. I would hope so in the future, because there are many components of these assessments that will affect nutrient use efficiency. But similarly, with weed management trials, we have a lot of those out. Fungicide trials, all the different types of trials we have on the farm. Should these soil health assessments be incorporated into those to get a better understanding of what soil factors are influencing those other components throughout the year? I think we have an understanding at this point, whether it's anecdotal or based in science, that soil factors will influence many different components of the cropping system throughout the year. And the more testing we do, the better we'll have an understanding of what influences what and when. What was that time frame look like? And to what degree? Is it a small factor? Is it a large factor? Should it be something we're even bringing up in our conversations, making recommendations? Or is it something that's going to be so small, so minuscule that maybe we shouldn't even be focusing on it? And then lastly, just events like this. Jen and Dan are putting on coordinated field events, educational programming, making sure that we have, again, the consistency in what we're recommending. So as I'm moving forward here, I'll go through kind of where our farmers are at that we've been working with and testing And most of this is just pie charts, just kind of giving you the ranges of different practices and soil types, those kind of factors that we're testing across with the Soil Health Partnership, even in the past couple of years. Again, we're only moving into our third year right now, or halfway through our third year right now. So even in that component, just showing you who we're working with.
So that's for all the demo farmers?
This is just for Illinois. So this is only the 18 sites in Illinois that we've been testing across. And
there's 10% or low in Illinois?
Well, this is a function of who's enrolled in the program. So just, but so we're trying to be representative. So the yield environment does vary. The numbers I used for low was kind of under 130, and then medium was kind of 130 bushels to about 175 bushels for corn, and then high was about 175. Pretty arbitrary, but just to kind of give an idea of the variability we have in the yield environment. The soil texture is a function of where our sites are. This probably shouldn't be a surprise to many people, but it's mostly kind of silt loam or in that silt loam category with maybe some silty clay loam for the majority of the soils. This would be the dominant soil type that we have within each individual field. Beautiful soils in Illinois, especially in central Illinois. So this is not a lot of variability in the dominant soil within the individual field. Granted, we have many other soil types that are represented across our fields that we're sampling across. This is just the highest majority or highest percentage within the field. Rotation. You can tell me if this is representative of people you work with or your operations. But looking across corn, soybean, we have a little bit of corn, soybean, wheat. Not many with continuous corn right now. Probably a function of where we're at with prices, the variability or lack of high commodity prices there. So this is just where we're at. And then integration with livestock. How many have livestock or not? Again, you can tell me if this is representative of the people, everyone you're working with. But we're trying to be representative in this program, collecting realistic data for the greatest number of farmers in the state. And so we're trying, in that representation, this is probably somewhat close. Maybe it's a little bit high in number of farmers with manure, maybe not. And then the breakdown between cattle and hog, who's using what.
Now that's manure, you're saying that's 14%, or only 14% using manure?
Yeah, right now. At least in the testing, and again, we're trying to be representative in the farmers we're bringing in. And then the different types of tillage we're using, and we'll break this down more as we're doing additional summaries with the data that we'll talk about a little bit later. But the different types of tillage, and we know there's a lot of different types of tillage. We know there are a lot of different definitions that go with different types of tillage. We try to be kind of simplified in our approach. We had to start somewhere. This is just a rough breakdown of what we have. We see those colors. I'm sorry about the colors, but about the conservation tillage, a combination of the vertical till, a modified disc, the low disturbance field cultivation. That's the 48%, the biggest percentage up there, biggest chunk up there of that pie chart up there. Along with that, the no-till at 33%, and then the various strip-till, no-till combinations after that. And these numbers are based on the the federal data that we can look at, and other survey data that we have for farm tillage practices. It's not too far off, really, that we have maybe about 40% of our farmers using no-till, and then we can break that down, maybe 30% of our farmers are using continuous no-till. So again, we're just trying to be representative in the data we collect, so we have realistic results coming out that can be helpful. And then with the cover crops, what are we seeing with the cover crops? Because every one of these components that we're talking about up here will affect that assessment and how we interpret that assessment. And that's, again, where it gets really complicated. So that's why I'm spending time going through the different summaries here. With the cover crops, we see a lot of cereal rye, 75% of our farmers working with cereal rye. And then in addition to that, winter wheat, triticale, and then the multi-species cocktail mixes after, say, a wheat crop. All right, got about 15 minutes left. And again, I mentioned I would start with and really focus on the Cornell Soil Health Assessment, but we know that there are other ones out there. And Donna, I'm sorry I don't have Missouri up here. I should. I definitely should. I should apologize for neglecting that. But I listed the first one up there, the Soil Measurement Assessment Framework. This work has been around probably the longest in terms of soil health assessment or soil quality assessment work, starting with the National Lab for Ag and the Environment, or the Soil Tilth Lab, Dr. Doug Carlin, Susan Andrews, and a few others up there really kind of pioneered this work to look across soil types all over the world, many different soil factors and metrics within that. And really, it is this framework. It's supposed to be. It was designed to be used universally, so and then calibrated against yields, really globally. They have many publications out there. This is really where a lot of the other work is building upon the soil measurement assessment framework. For example, the Cornell Soil Health Assessment ratings that we see are really built upon the work that was done with the soil measurement assessment framework. And that's kind of where we're going back to with the Soil Health Partnership as well, going back to that framework that Dr. Carlin and others put together. And then we have the Soil Health Nutrient Tool, otherwise known as the Haney Test. And we can look across all these, we can look across the different publication records they all have in the scientific community. And the Soil Measurement Assessment Framework has most publications. It's been around the longest, a framework that has been used pretty actively. Then we can go to Cornell, a number of publications coming out of the assessments used in Cornell. And then the Haney Test, relatively few publications. And so within this talk, I'm really just going to focus on Cornell because it is commercially available and there are some publications along with it. And the metrics being used are based in science and have been published upon much more so than the Haney Test in the past. So the main results section of the report is broken down in physical, biological, and chemical components. And each one of these, you can look through them, and they have the various publication records associated with each individual one of these metrics. But every single one of them has been published upon and has some credibility there. In the physical, what I like to look at is the values in these. So across all the Soil Health Partnership sites or any sites we're looking at, the values, I know the methods that Cornell are using are quality methods. Have been published upon. They're consistent. The ratings, this is what we'll probably spend a little bit more time here talking about. The ratings, we have some variability in these ratings, and the trust factor there is one that I kind of question at this point. And we're definitely working with Cornell, working with Harold Van Ness and Aaron Risto to try to work with them to update their ratings to further calibrate those for the Midwest. They pick these specific soil measurements and then calibrate that for the New England soils, the New England cropping systems. It made a lot of sense. I mean, the way they put this together was very strategic. It made a lot of sense for New York and into New England. But as we look to the Midwest, there's a little bit more variability in our soil types. We have different cropping systems out here by and large. So as we come to the Midwest, we need to gather a lot more data to further calibrate these assessments. And the calibration, again, goes back to what I mentioned earlier and all those different factors and what we're calibrating against, how we're calibrating the individual assessments. So we can look across these available water capacity. That number up there is a gram of the units on that is gram per gram, so gram of water per gram of soil. We can look down the surface hardness and subsurface hardness. Dan was mentioning the penetrometer readings. That's really what those get at. Underneath that, we have aggregate stability. So percentage of aggregates that remain intact after they use the standardized method to assess aggregate stability, so how well that soil really holds together. Then we can go into the biological indicators, organic matter, ACE soil protein index. The ACE soil protein index is an indication. It's from talking to Harold and Dan Mobius-Clune. It can be thought of similarly to potentially mineralizable nitrogen. So they're really their methods they do, they just extract all the proteins from the soil and then put it in an index to give you an idea of a readily available nitrogen source for the microbial community. Similarly to that, we have soil respiration and active carbon. Soil respiration, we know there's a lot of variability in respiration and how you do it. The results coming out, the different management factors we talked about earlier, when you take the sample, how that soil is treated, fertilization, tillage, We know that has great influence on respiration and some of these other ones as well. But it's just telling you, giving you a kind of an indicator of how much CO2 is evolving or coming off of that soil as a rough indicator of that microbial activity. And then active carbon, it's a fraction of the carbon that's readily available for the microbial community as well. Just as a starting point. And this is where, so we're looking at this, we're collecting a lot of information in addition to this Cornell assessment, but we wanted to start somewhere, and this is a good place to start. It is commercially available and being used through the Midwest as well as other places. The chemical components and the ratings up there, that area probably isn't too new to anybody. I mean, that's probably pretty consistent with what we've been seeing in our routine analyses. So we take all these different assessments, all the different indicators throughout the soil, then we can start to think about, well, what does it mean? How do we interpret these? And now you get to see my artwork. And Dan and Jim, I'm sorry you guys have seen this artwork a little bit before. So we have these different response curves that we can form. And maybe we can turn on one here. Yeah, thank you. So the first one would be kind of on the upper left-hand corner, more is better. And I mean, I'll just ask, who can give me an idea, a soil indicator where we want more? What would that be? If you're thinking about different types of soil tests. Oh, why?
Organic matter.
Organic matter, perfect. And what I like about these response curves is that we can vary these for each individual soil type. So organic matter, we know generally more is better to a point, to a degree. We see this level off at the top. But let's somebody name a soil type that's close by. Tama. So starting from 0 to maybe 6-7% on a very high end in the Tama. Oh, sorry. What was it?
That's
So we can create our own response curve and say this is yield. Yield on the y-axis and organic matter. So that's our example. And we can create that response curve. So that's, general response curve. So we know as we're increasing organic matter, we can see general response, yield increasing. This could also be economics. We could create the same thing for dollars. How much do we want to invest in that organic matter? We can look at water quality, so nitrate in stream water. You can create whatever response curve you want. You can put that different indicator there and then look based on the data you collect. And we know the data is going to be all over. It's going to be, as Dan pointed out earlier with Tim's data, sometimes it's a scatter plot approach. Sometimes we can see generalized response curves. But we can create these based on whatever calibration factor we're really looking at. And that's the important thing again. What's the most important question you want to ask for that individual soil indicator? So let's take a different soil type. I'm from Wisconsin, so I'll take one and I did a lot of work in potatoes. So I'll take a soil type that I'm pretty familiar with, and maybe you've heard of it, the Sparta sand. It's a soil type that has almost no organic matter. So I was familiar with, say, 0 to 1%. 1%, maybe 2% on the high end. I'll stay 1% just to be realistic here. We can form that same general response curve for that different soil type based on the data. It's not going to be perfect like this, but we can use that same general response curve for many different soil types. That's why I really like it, because we can apply it differentially depending on where you're at. And it's similar to different soil types. We could change it with different management practices. We can see, so maybe pull this one down. Maybe with tillage, we see the response is incredibly quick. If you have a history of tillage, if you're 5 more minutes, I'll wrap this up and we can keep going. Or if we have a no-till or a no-till situation, and you're looking at organic matter over long-term history, maybe it's a slow, elongated response curve. So this is kind of how we're interpreting the data. Similarly, with the less is better, that might be something like compaction, where you don't want as much compaction. And then an optimal response curve, that might be like pH, where we're looking for an optimal zone. So I guess where I'm going with this is that we're still early in the data collection process, and we're looking at the different indicators, but there are many different ways we can interpret this, but I like looking at the response curves because we can apply those differentially to different soil types. Maybe I'll just wrap up here with our own data. We're creating summaries that kind of look like this. This is very early on. We're only 2 years into data collection. But what we're looking at for the different indicators out there, available water capacity would be one. We can break it down by those soil factors. We can break it down by the cropping system rotation. What is it? Continuous corn? Is it corn soybeans? Corn soybean wheat? And then similarly, we can do this across every single one. We can look at different interactions and try to figure out which indicators are most responsive to different types of management. And so with that, we can start looking at this over the long term to make better recommendations. If we find out that aggregate stability is a limiting factor in that soil, we can make better recommendations by understanding, is it a soil influence? Is it soil texture, soil type? Is it a management practice influence? Is it a combination of those two? What does that look like along with rainfall, or how does that affect it? And so within our program, we're starting to put together the summaries that we'll even post to our website very soon to help in not only our interpretation, but working with, say, the Soil Health Institute, many others in the space to understand what these recommendations should be. And I think I'm right at time, so I'll kind of take a break here.
Other questions?